Okay. What are you gonna do?
Right age. Right.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, because I can project if I need to. So welcome, everyone, to our first event for the semester in the ongoing Little Kanawha reading series. And welcome to all of you out there watching this on our YouTube stream and cyberspace. Thank you, Josh Brennan from GSU's marketing team for making that possible. As you probably know, the Little Kanawha Reading Series is a collaboration between the Department of Language and Literature, the Department of Social Science, and the Robert F. Kidd Library. Its mission is to provide a showcase for a diversity of literary forms and voices in order to acknowledge and enrich the cultural heritage of Appalachia and the communities around the Little Kanawha River. Before I introduce this afternoon's reader, I'd like to thank Jason Gaunt, who's running around here somewhere in the RFK Library, for once again hosting us and for providing snacks as well. We do have a wonderful reader for this evening. Renée K. Nicholson is the author of Fierce and Delicate, Essays on Dance and Illness. She is the co-editor of the award-winning anthology, Bodies of Truth, Personal Narratives of Illness, Disability, and Medicine. And she's also the author of the poetry collection, Roundabout Directions to Lincoln Center. She received the 2018 Susan S. Landis Award for Distinguished Service in the Arts from the West Virginia Division of Arts, Culture, and History. She also received a fellowship from the West Virginia Humanities Council and a grant from the West Virginia Commission on the Arts. Renée is an expert in the field of health humanities And this is such an interesting and vitally important topic right now for all sorts of reasons that I thought I would invite everyone after her reading to ask her questions about this field, because this is such a wonderful opportunity to do so. I should also say that this isn't Renee's first time visiting our campus. She was kind enough to be a guest to my creative writing class a few years ago, early in my career here at GSU. So let's please welcome back to our campus, Renée K. Nicholson.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for coming out. And gosh, hopefully I'll have some things here that'll be fun and exciting. I can read from Fierce and Delicate. I'll probably read something kind of short. I have a new book of poems, postscript, and a few new poems, and I find that sometimes poems are just fun to get things going. But I'll read a little something here from Fierce and Delicate. So I had trained in classical ballet, and I had danced professionally, and then was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease that attacks your joints. That was kind of a career ender for the dancing, but dancing actually really never left me. It just became a source of inspiration for writing. So I'm just going to read, and this is one of those little essays that kind of came out, and I'm like, is it an essay? Is it a poem? Is it a poem essay? And it's called Never Famous. Enter the blank room. Walls flanked by 2 levels of bars, except for the one wall of mirror. Sometimes you must study what's reflected, other times you must ignore it. Eyes deceive, especially your own eyes, upon your own form. Breathe. Demi-plie. It's a way to begin. Work the foot, crease to demi-point, feel the instep, stretch to full point, don't crunch the toes, crease again. You are waking up from muscles of the foot. Warm the body from the feet up to the head, slow, methodical. Maybe light filters in through a window. Maybe you're in a box. It could be raining or snowing outside, sun shining bright. In here, weather doesn't exist. This is the atmosphere of music. 4/4, 6/8, allegro, adagio, waltz. You're here for hours. 6, 8, 10 more. You repeat combinations over and over, lots of posing in lines, and then move, go. Your body tires, dance harder. Sweat beads, drips, dries, you sweat again. Layer in sweatshirts and leg warmers between one studio and another. Strip them off as you move again. Gaussade, arabesque. You snack on fruit, lunch on tuna, drink Diet Coke for the rush of caffeine. Whatever keeps you trim but keeps you going. Tea, coffee, Advil. Your eyes tell all. Sorrow, elation, frustration, tiredness. Your hair is pulled from your face, full and pinned in a knot. This emphasizes your eyes even more. Wear mascara if you think it helps. Sew ribbons and elastics on shoes during breaks. Read paperbacks you swap with others. Read paperbacks your mother sent in care packages. Keep medical tape and Band-Aids in your bag. Sprinkle baby powder, but not perfume. Pack extra everything, shoes, tights, leotards, bobbin pins, t-shirts. Bring a chiffon skirt if you need to feel pretty. Sometimes you need to feel pretty. Take bar next to dancers better than you. Practice, practice more, pray. There are a few things I know for sure. Ballet is work. The work is beautiful and often thankless. Some performances you get flowers, others you don't. Mostly you rehearse. There are no flowers for rehearsal. Most dancers are never famous. Don't worry about that. Dance like you are the most beautiful creature that ever existed, even when, no, especially when your practice tutu is dirty and your point shoes are dead and you feel all but spent. Yeah, I love that piece because it speaks so much to the dancing, but I think it also speaks so much to the arts, right? And it can be really seductive to think, oh, I'm going to be this famous dancer, famous author, famous whatever. But most of us are just kind of workaday artists doing their thing. And that's actually really quite beautiful. So I like to share that piece for that because I'm hoping there's some artists, some writers in today's audience. And you should do it even if you're going to be never famous. So I'm going to read a couple of poems now, some that have to do with West Virginia. My family's all from Wood in Jackson County, if we have any Wood in Jackson County people. Vienna? What? Wood County? Yeah. So this is actually a poem I wrote for my dad. My dad and I have a funny kind of contest. Because he lives in Georgia now, and I moved around a lot, but I've now lived in West Virginia 20 years. And so he and I have a contest on who's more West Virginian, and of course it's me. I'm the one hanging out with all of our other family members, but don't tell him that. And if he's watching this later, he'll find a way to get me back. But I really admire my dad. He was a first-generation college student, and so this is a poem for him. It's called Dreamland. My father dreams of West Virginia, his boyhood on Granddad's farm, hunting dogs and fame and tomatoes in the garden. Now he's tucked between other mountains and a man-made lake. We dream is not to die, and when my father dreams, it's not coal or mines shuttered, not abandoned towns or J.C. Penney's turned into a senior center, not heroin or oxy. He fished streams, gutted, cooked, and ate what he caught. He rolled through what passed for highways and a Triumph TR3, bought with money from News and Sentinel routes, listened to the Pirates take the series on a radio set on a chrome-edged table, now rusted, Fiesta-ware chipped. But Dad, maybe this is the only place we belong, a broken place with its ragged side of the heart. Today I saw a man with an enormous suitcase. He dragged it down and out of town. What treasure might require such effort? In West Virginia, I bought an old house I fill with oddities and books. Like my father's dreams, I live almost heaven imperfect, so close I might have touched the night as it pulled across the sky, a dark curtain. The sun eases through the threadbare spots. It slits and frays soon enough. That's for my dad. So I'm going to do a couple of other West Virginia focused poems. So it was COVID and it was West Virginia Day 2020 and nobody could go anywhere or do anything, but I kept getting all these things and I was listening to West Virginia Public Radio and it was like, Happy West Virginia Day. And was kind of like looking around my yard, hanging out. And later that night, I was sitting out on my patio and I was seeing stars. And I look over at my husband and I say, oh, it can't be that bad. Look at all the stars. And he said, Renee, it's probably space junk. That's how this poem got started. Tracing inert gases on West Virginia Day. Truth is, I don't really know what Xenon is. But some nights, full up with stars, summer sky might just be packed with satellites, planets, or some kind of space junk, twinkling away as if it wasn't flotsam from the space race, husks of men's egos past, needing to tame heaven. Here, in this place, lightning bugs, also known as fireflies, eliminate a second before moving on. I'm living in this time where the watch around my wrist tends not to keep much meaning. I saw a baby groundhog slip into a drain. Groundhogs are known as woodchucks or whistle pigs. These words so slippery, I can't seem to hold on to any. Can't grasp their meanings, as if all the words that might explain this one moment in time all morphed into glittering space junk, orbiting, spinning madly around us, spinning madly until this day when a state was born, not inert like Xenon, but out of conflict which flashes its underbelly, not whistle pig or lightning bug or any other synonym that's not quite the right word. Garbage stars float in the night sky among those that implode into a great gaping nothing. A black hole swallowed up God, yet wonder refuses being inert or being snuffed out. So, thank you. So Jonathan mentioned that I work in the area of health humanities, and that looks at how we can use the practices we learn in humanistic study and bring them to healthcare situations. And some of them have been my own experiences, but I also worked with a lot of different patient groups. I spent 2 years at the WVU Cancer Institute in the infusion center, writing life stories with patients getting chemotherapy. And that really, really impacted my practice. And so I'm going to read a series of poems here that really speak to that. At the same time I was doing this, I would sometimes moonlight as a dance instructor. And so this first poem is a weird intersection of teaching dance and understanding something about illness. So I like those weird intersections, as you probably already noticed. I think they're really great to kind of tease out what you really think about something. So this is a poem called Bury the Lead. They say the sharks came early and stayed late, unwanted guests off the shores of California, because early warming of the water, perhaps caused by El Nino, who knows? We're not allowed to utter climate change anymore. I watched the gathered juvenile great whites cruise the rocky shoreline via embedded video. Safe in Appalachian mountains, they say there are no sharks here. Last week, while teaching ballet to little girls, a great white SUV careened towards the glass door of our studio, stopped inches before crashing through. When asked, they say that SUV was struck by an oncoming vehicle that pushed the great white right up to the clear glass, driven by a man trying to drive and shoot up. His severed bumper shoved in the back seat, the syringe, blood-tinged, left bare and open, a creepy souvenir. The car sped away. I've heard all about the opioid crisis, nothing else to do. Here it was, up close, nearly crashing through. Out west, great whites patrol the beaches. They say sharks prefer seals, but perhaps the hapless sea bathers might choose to call it a day. Lifeguards fly the flag. Water's unsafe. But here, the patrol act's different. A cop on the scene did not bag the evidence, threw the syringe into a Long John Silver's dumpster among the remnants of fish sandwiches. Blood's no good, he said, because there's no database to match it. They say sharks smell blood for miles, but there are no sharks in Appalachia. We might say we've manufactured our own kind of predator, dead in the water or on the hillside parking lot. It doesn't matter much. Let me tell you, there will be blood, and all kinds of sharks will find it. It's a really surreal thing to see this like white, and I had just been watching juvenile white sharks, because you can watch anything on YouTube now, right? It's like the glorious moment I can see almost anything. But watching that, and it just came on, it was inches. It was scary. So when I was working in the infusion center, I was writing these stories with patients, and we were working under a grant, and I say we because I was working with a physician. And to get this money, we had to go through HIPAA training, and it's the only time in my life where I've done creative writing that was HIPAA protected, meaning I can't share their stories with you. They can share their stories, but it's protected health information, which is really interesting to me. But as I was sitting there, I worked with 72 patients in 2 years. They were definitely, having an effect on me. And so I was like, I'm learning something. What do I do with this? And so often, when I don't know what to do with something, I just turn to poetry because it seems the right vehicle for all the stuff we don't know what to do with. So I wrote this poem for them, and it's actually after a little chapbook by a poet named D.C. Berry, who wrote this little, maybe 20 pages of poems called the Zen Cancer Saloon. I always liked that name, and I always loved those poems. And I never read anything else by this poet. I've never been able to find anything else by D.C. Berry. So this is Zen Cancer Saloon after D.C. Berry. In the Zen Cancer Saloon, you won't find Clark Gable nor John Wayne. No six-shooters nor swinging wood doors. The drinks are damn near poison, drop steady like a soaking rain. The patrons readily offer up their stories like a platter of fried chicken, side of okra, another of collard greens, stuff they no longer eat. A shot of whiskey just to settle the stomach. Complaints are few at the Zen Cancer Saloon, and if the fare is noxious, the service pretty good. A smile, a kind of currency, the tips not bills nor coins. Gonna look at this thing. Every day's a gift. Que sera, sera, even on the drip. The one place where it would be okay to bitch and moan, but the patrons never waver. Line up at their recliners as if bar stools, trade in happiness. List the things they're grateful for and slip into that stupor of not quite slumber, the racket fading. Last call, tab closed out. So at the same time that I was working with these patients at WVU Cancer Institute, my younger brother was diagnosed with colon cancer. So it was a really odd juxtaposition. And for the most part, he didn't want to talk to me about it, not because he didn't want to talk to me. He was tired of everybody always asking, how is the cancer going? And he said, everybody knows me as cancer guy. And he's like, sometimes I just want to complain about the PTA, right? And talk about, my kids and, just everyday things. And so for the most part, I honored that. I was like, all right, we'll just talk about whatever. And boy, did he have complaints about the PTA in this town in Georgia. But I had a kind of need to know, right, what I learned was and so, once again, went to poetry. And when I wrote this, I knew I was going to have to share it with them. And I finally, kind of screwed up the courage to do it, and I emailed it to him. And he texted me, and he said, I got your poem. And I said, are you okay with it? And he said, that's it, Renee. That's exactly what it's like. So This is eucalyptus. Nate had a stuffed koala bear that had no name. As kids, we went to the Metro Zoo to see the koala exhibit. In the eucalyptus tree, the animal napped. Heavy-lidded, Nate snoozes, chemo works its alchemy. And Nate is a koala, sleeping 23 hours a day, slipping from that slumber into a semi-lucid wakefulness, focused on the consumption of calories. Eucalyptus works as both sustenance and drug, the koala both bull and stone, ears alert to predator or whatever koalas might fear, hidden within the tree's leaves. Nate's wrapped in an afghan, our mother crocheted to keep her worried hands busy. Chemo's a constant drip, not the hour or so of gorging beans. Down under, koalas live among the other marsupials. Down under, the patients stay tethered by tubes to trees, of fluid packs, and monitors, all drowsy like koalas perched in branches, the rhythmic path of sleep breathing, eyes shuttered, hands clasped together, as if in some kind of prayer. So that's for my brother Nate. Let's see. Do a little time check and get a little water. You get up here, you're like, I'm not thirsty, and then all of a sudden your throat is bone dry. I was, before the reading, talking about the difference between reading from poetry or prose and dancing. And the biggest difference for me was when you're dancing, you have footlights, so the audience is just a gray blur. But when you read poems, you can look people in the eye. Very different experience. So I'm actually going to change tack. I feel like I've given you a lot of like heavy cancer poems, and I'm really proud. So I have this friend, her name is Sally Jean Brown. She's a visual artist. And in the last couple of years, I wanted just a fun project. So I started writing poems about West Virginia cryptids, as one does when one wants just a fun project. And she said, can I read them? And I said, sure. And then she read them and she's like, can I illustrate them? And I was like, oh my gosh. So we made this little fun book, art and poems, just because we wanted something fun to do. And it's What We Do in the Hollows, kind of like the TV show What We Do in the Shadows. So I want to read one from this collection. And here's Sally's art, which, yeah, it's very fun. She's and so I don't know if any of you are into motorsports or, like me, have tons of relations who are into motorsports, but I have cousins that are always talking about the Ona Speedway, because the Ona Speedway is the only paved track in West Virginia, and it was supposed to be the next Darlington. That didn't quite happen. It actually shuttered in the 80s for a while, but it's back. So this poem is Speedway Mid-Season Championship. And the Speedway is brought to you by One Way Septic Tank Service and Rent a Can, Kann, LLC. I feel like that's important for you to know about this poem. So, Speedway Mid-Season Championship. Bumper to bumper, wheel to wheel, a real heart pounder. Short track, stock cars, only $15 a pop. Mothman, camouflage, this hot night in Ona, only paved track in West Virginia. Supposed to be phase one of a larger course. Project never happened. A repeat story in these parts. Still, Mothman talked among spectators' eyes, the old blueprint, beautiful in an unrequited way. Place stood the whole of the 80s, but this is NASCAR country. And if it's not Darlington, at least it's something. Late models, modifieds, hobby stocks, thunderstorm will shut you down, but on a good night, points are won. Schaefer's Drive-In concessions serve sweaty cola after cola. Mothman watches the crashes, the occasional fire, the unruly fans, or the quiet old man who understands mechanics. But Mothman's here for the drama, feeding off the chaos, but not of his own making. A vacation where he might slip away after hours of roaring cars and squealing tires and hopes dashed and the thrill of a win in this place that never does. Lights out. So, most people tend to not think the same person who writes a memoir and essays about dance to also write about the own Speedway, which the lesson there is just always have a little surprise. You just never know. So I picked one of the poems that I was going to read because I had some questions from some professors, and it felt like in a weird way this would consider one of those. And it kind of slanted. A slanted answer is better than nothing, right? So this is called Reviewer's Notes. And it's really just a commentary on life. Reviewer's Notes. Definitive account of nothing. Mundane, coup de grace, touch of ordinary, pedantic, everyday, red table wine, and instant oatmeal, fabulously outfitted chicken nuggets, box store ambition, the sensible sedan driven through suburbia, the Cracker Jack fries, full of nuts and caramel, signifying Little League, my kid's an honor student, overstocked candy canes, lapsed in January, crumbled in bits. It's television upstairs and downstairs, dinner trays of mac and cheese and crinkle cut fries and frozen food aisle. No handcrafted Italian loafers, but sensible sneakers with orthotic inserts purchased after filling out a questionnaire at a kiosk between antifungal gel and Band-Aids. No artifice or artisanal cheeses, just supersized diet drinks and menthol lifters coating the throat in sugar and syrup. The tickle, the catch, that scratchy voice soothed into the other world of home remedies, a toaster strudel, those tiny million busy nothings pressing in and leaving us just a bit left. So I thought I'd read a couple of newer poems, and it's always like, I read the newer poems. Are they ready for the big time? We'll see. Amen. But so I'm working on a new book, and a little bit about process. I handwrite all of my first drafts. It is not efficient, but it's effective. So I don't question it. So these have found that I never write on the first page of my notebooks because I feel like later I'll fill in a title, and then usually it's a couple titles and it's scratched out. So the current title of this work in progress is called Paper Dreams. But that can be crossed out, and that's when it's completely different. So a couple of new poems. I got a lot like here in West Virginia. So, and a couple that also have to do, I think, at least obliquely about narrative medicine and health humanities. So, this first one is called Lost River Card. The beige and brown of it, like late autumn, sand and rock. We climbed to Renée K, surveyed an undulating land, wishing to go follow. I wore my Lost River Card like a locket or a talisman, cold stone and my collarbone. The sun, high, hot, while a single fuchsia thistle stood at attention. If you could wish on blue sky, the day was yours. the day was mine. Wishing, wishing, and the wind shaking the green and gold leaves as if to say fall, as if to say fall. They're different tenor. I love old movies. Love Cary Grant. I don't think we've replaced Cary Grant. I don't know that we'll ever replace Cary Grant. So I find myself watching old movies and then having no idea what movies are actually new coming out and who any actors are. So that kind of informs this next poem, which is, upon watching North by Northwest, I am no longer young. Cary Grant just dove into a stand of cornstalks, dust clinging to his sharp gray suit. When I get a message from a friend that lost 2 siblings last year, one expected, one not. This summer, my only brother will be dead 5 years. So much and so little time. The Hitchcock blonde is never who she seems. Perfect cat-eye lid and pale lips. We move between 2 worlds. Celluloid flicker and the atmosphere here below, where the cereal and steak lives march on. I don't know what to tell my friend. Growing old feels thin. My brother and I told jokes about becoming shuffleboard champs at the old age community. Instead, I watched Tippi Hedren run with Cary Grant across Washington's nose, or is it Eva Marie Saint across Lincoln's? All dead, along with my friend's siblings and my only brother, and yet some hope glows brighter than my big screen TV, like an ember lost from the underworld or overworld, whatever world exists beyond. I compose my response, vowels all wrong. I'm sorry, long and bland. Instead, I wish to extend my hand to his, clutching our feeble dreams. On screen, Cary Grant's gestures say what words never do. You check the time. We have time for a couple more. Or not. She just gave me a look like, crazy, keep reading. I like that. Some Wood County solidarity happening over poetry. So, yeah, I think these poems have taken on a very different tone for me, and they're very surreal in a way that I'm kind of excited about. And I also don't quite know what to do with it. That's probably a good uncomfortable place for a poet to be. This is a poem called Riverfront Timepieces. At not quite the golden hour, luck ran like a slow-flowing river despite the rain. I threw myself into it, but of course I didn't. A thin sun trickled beam through rips and seams. Aren't we such a broken down folk? The smell of rain, or bread in the oven, sizzle of sauteed onion. I sliced the radish. The things of the earth can cure you if you let them. Drips from the tin roof like a novel, the dime store variety, as if there were any of those left. Think of me in those peacock blues, setting sun sinking into the uneven ridge, where the night critters begin to stir. Trees twist in the purple dark, the muddy river pushing nothing but tarnished pennies. So that's about the Monongahela River, which I'm pretty sure is pushing tarnished pennies. So, again, these are all kind of poems that feel very place-oriented. So I was visiting down in North Carolina, some people who work in health, and I was talking about rural health And they said, well, you have the problem we have. It's old here. Everything's old. I thought, oh, everything is old. And then I couldn't get that out of my head for, about a week or so after. Of course, I wrote a poem about it. But I was like, old. So, under and again. A seam in the bituminous pull like a vein in the body. And I'm told this land is old and that we are an old people with old ways, but I'm not that old yet. And when spring redbirds start to explode the hill's bright fuchsia, there is nothing so old about it. And if you stare at a place long enough, you might find surface clues to what's underneath. Once I dug a brick up in the yard from a road that no longer runs through this patch of earth, gone like the chestnuts in the seam of black gold, the ceaseless churn we call progress. And then I saw the bluebird in flight, and it was Morgan. So, anybody here into astronomy? I almost said astrology, and that would have been a very different conversation. So I had an impromptu astronomy lesson that kind of informed this next poem. And like many of the poems that are sort of coming together in this new collection, it went to a strange, surreal place. And again, I think I'm okay with that. And it's called Rings of Saturn. My dog's golden fur seems a deeper shade in the snow. Her paws hurt from the bitter cold. Too much for her, too much for me. Her face has whitened like dogs do when they age. And I know I will lose her, just as I have lost others, and how someone might lose me. My hair is turning white, not gray. The darker and lighter strands create an optical illusion. Like youth or beauty or the snow, which will, come spring, melt into platters of mud. Yet I love the snow. Winter is slowing. We plod through the thick of it, brilliant, almost blinding if you let it. We plod along, the only sound in a quiet neighborhood, except the occasional sighs of the wind. We round a corner, take the straight way home. My old dog will slide into the thick white and roll, pause in the air, a kind of revelry, before she finds the warmth of the house, a tasty treat. And I might wonder why I don't drop into the white and roll to make snow angels like a child. I wouldn't easily get up, but I laugh at the idea of it. I remember walking to my car across a blustery parking lot only a few days before, and a kid, couldn't have been 20, pointed to a brightness in the sky. It's not a star, it's Saturn, he said. And I like to think my old dog looked up as she rolled and saw bright Saturn in the winter's night sky. And maybe one night we'll walk right through the neighborhood and into the black sky and past all the dim stars and onto the rings of that bright Saturn, looking back at all that is wonderful and still and full on Earth. I think that helps entertain some questions.
Okay, yeah, let's give Renee one more round of applause if you like what you heard. Thank you so much. And I think they need forms for keepers. They do. So yeah, since we're lucky enough to have Renee here, I'd like to open things up for questions about health humanities. Or since she raised the issue, if you want to ask her questions about West Virginia cryptids.
Right.
That's on the table too.
Right.
Well, I'll kick things off because he couldn't be here, but Wesley Kephart has some questions for Renee. Wesley is a professor in our new College of Exercise Science. In this first question, he says it's somewhat in relation to fierce and delicate. And so I'll read the question that Wesley sent in. He says, we live in a time where, and he put this in quote marks, so I'll use my air quotes, we live in a time where health is somewhat mechanical and superficial. And he has a note here, and he says, feel free to disagree with that. In older times, there seemed to be a more authentic understanding of a, quotes again, beautiful strength. And he adds, this is where we get the word calisthenics. Kalos, Greek for beauty, stenos, Greek for strength, if I pronounce that correctly. And here's his question. How could we get back to that as a society without taking it too far, as you perhaps experienced in your professional ballet training? And I don't think your poem answered that one.
No, that
Okay,
wasn't.
I was like looking, so.
Yeah, so, yeah, this is one of those questions I was really excited to get ahead of time so I could, really formulate my thoughts, right? And so, like, today, this day in 2025, health is a fraught word, right? It's being used in all sorts of ways that maybe we've never kind of experienced before, right? And the whole idea of what is healthy is under a terrific pressure, right? And it's become overtly political and polarizing, which I think, unfortunately, has the absolute opposite effect on our actual health, right? And so I kind of loved his discussion of calisthenics and breaking it apart into its Greek roots, right? And I think it does harken to a time when we found the human form itself and its functions beautiful, right? When you see like a statue of ancient Greek athletes, they're beautiful, right? And we now live in a society that doesn't always appreciate bodies, right? And we tend to fetishize some while ignoring all the ways in which modern life is relentless on the human body. Things like processed foods, overworking jobs that don't promote, healthy lifestyles, getting enough time to have exercise and movement. And so I think activities like ballet or other kinds of dancing or similar types of things, yoga would be another, can help us in some ways. And so this put me in mind of a friend of mine who's been thinking deeply about ballet and aging. And she teaches a wide range of ballet classes for the Pacific Northwest Ballet in Seattle. But her favorite is teaching adults. And she said those are dancers who come to the studio for the love of movement and the sheer enjoyment of moving a body in an artistic way. I mean, just right there, like, yes. And then when they leave, they go back to the lives they lead, their jobs or families and all that. And so this friend, who's a former professional dancer also, finds that she's enjoying her dancing more, being well past her performing years, as am I, with these adults more than any dancing she's done in her life. And she's always enjoyed dancing, so that's really telling us something about what this can do. And then I started thinking about like the technology, and technology was supposed to give us back time. I don't know if anybody remembers the article teaching me, you're going to have a 15-hour work week. I'm like, on top of your regular work week, if you're lucky, right? And so we've gone from the 15-hour work week to technology now valorizing overwork. And so people don't always have the time for those kind of pursuits anymore. And that's a shame. But when I think about like some of the things that happen in a ballet class, I think about the concept of balance, right? And balance in ballet terms, which are really also physics, are oppositional forces working together to suspend you, right? And my early ballet teachers would say, push down to stay up, right? So that my little 7, 8, 9-year-old brain could understand that concept. what if we took that idea of balance and we could apply it more broadly, that these oppositional forces are what like keeps us suspended. And when that gives us a different perspective. And I really think so. I don't know if that answered his question
I think
or not.
so. In fact,
really think about it.
I think your poem answered his second question, which was about technology, and Wesley called that and I love this phrase, a Frankenstein that's slowly killing us. And I think you answered that, and I think your poem spoke to that as well. Any questions from the audience for Renee about health, humanities, or anything that she has brought up?
This is more of a thought, I suppose, than a question, but some of the things you were saying there struck my mind. Something I read earlier, I have not went in and done an extreme amount of research to make sure this is 100% accurate. But, people talk about in capitalistic society, you talk a lot about how big pharma is controlling everything. Big pharma, these are big pharma. Well, one of the new terms, or not new, but one of the terms that's new to me is big wellness, from my understanding. The article I read is actually 3 times the money as far as in the United States has been spending on big wellness. Do you have any comment on that or any thoughts on that?
It's so interesting. And I hadn't really heard about big wellness, but yeah, I've experienced it, right? I mean, anytime you see the commercial for supplements and practices and, all the things that, you're supposed to do if you're going to lead this well life, right? And it's kind of slick marketing, not kind of, it is slick marketing, right? And I think about well-being really differently after working with the patients with cancer, and I also replicated that study with patients with HIV. And they had serious health problems. They had serious things going on. And something that struck me about these patients were physically they could be in poor health, but they could still have a sense of well-being. And that was amazing to me. It really, really spoke to me, like on this level of well-being being beyond just physically what's happening to you, right? And I feel like so much of like the well-being industry, right, is so much about the physical thing that we're encased in, right? And not enough about those other things that lead us to good health, right? Psychological well-being, a sense of safety, a sense of care, right? A sense of purpose, and I don't mean that in the like kind of purpose-driven, purpose statement, capitalistic way. I mean just that sense of being in a web of associations, family, friends, loved ones, things you love to do, things like that. Being held and having a sense of wellness around those things, right? I think it's really interesting what the wellness industry wants to sell us, right? Have this supplement and, you'll have shiny hair and lose 10 pounds and be smarter and brighter. You'll remember more. But when I think about like when I feel the most well, definitely, as you could probably tell from my poem, spending time with my dog. I love spending time with my loved one. In the moment of a poem, whether I'm writing it or it's this like beautiful thing I've read, I had a rheumatologist who I worked with for a long time, and he said he knew when I wasn't doing well because his first question to me was never, how are you doing? It was, what are you reading? And if I had like 4 books that I was into, he knew I was okay. But if I wasn't reading anything, he's like, we need to check your blood, make sure everything's okay. And so those kind of things, I think, are things that could kind of get lost because, they're not monetized. You're never going to have a big study around them, right? And wellness is slippery because, you'll see on like supplement labels, like, this doesn't go through the FDA. It goes through our own independent rigorous testing, right? And then I'm like, what is your own independent rigorous testing, right? So there's like all sorts of kind of slippery ways around that too. But I also think it's interesting how we promote linguistically this idea of like this big complete wholeness, and yet what we actually do is like partition it and fraction it out, right? So I don't know that I really have the answer to it, but I have a lot of ideas about what's going on. But yeah, the wellness industry has never, to my knowledge, gotten in touch with me or any other poet working in health humanities or narrative medicine and said, hey, we would like to put together a complete poetry program for wellness, right? It's individual people who see the value of it, and then find ways to make it happen. Yeah. I can. So narrative medicine was something I knew nothing about when I first encountered it. So that's why I love this question. It's taking practices of narrative, like understanding narrative, literary analysis, especially close reading of text, and also the creating of narratives, the creative writing sorts of things, and also, other ways of telling the story, visual art, and bringing them into healthcare situations. So this woman at Columbia University, her name is Dr. Rita Sharon, and Rita Sharon is a Henry James scholar and an internist at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. And she did her PhD while she was working as an internist, which I'm like, where did you find the time? Especially as a James scholar, right? And she started to see that the things that she was learning and talking about in her coursework in literary studies were having significant and beneficial consequences in her clinic. And so she started starting to unpack this, and she says that it's the ability to recognize, absorb, interpret, and act on the stories of others. Because she says the care of the sick unfolds in stories, and these are like 365, from the patient themselves to their caregivers, their families, their health professionals, their, everybody who's involved, and started to see that these stories had important consequences in a healthcare situation. I became acquainted with narrative medicine in a much less elegant fashion. A palliative care physician called me one night and told me he needed a creative writer. And I thought he was crazy. And he said, I didn't even know what palliative care was. I was like Googling it while he was talking to me. And he said, I have this patient who has ALS. And most of the time when I have patients with terminal diseases, they are worried about what will happen to their families and loved ones. Will it be painful? How will they manage their symptoms? And this guy kept saying, I don't know how I'm going to finish my memoir. And it was every time we saw him. So he made it his mission. And he's like, can you help him? And I'm like, I don't know if I could help him, but I'd certainly like to meet him. And that's what kind of started. And I was just compelled by this person's desire to get down his story, because he wanted his story to be there for his friends and family to come visit him, and for the future generations to know him in his own voice. And I thought that was so pure. And then, of course, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to help you, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I started Googling, and I was like, writing with ALS, writing with dying people, writing, and it kept taking me back to this practice called narrative medicine. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go take a workshop. Then I went and I took this workshop from Rita Sharon, and I'm like, oh, this is what I have to do. And it had never occurred to me that the essays I was writing about dancing and about losing dancing and going through the healthcare system were a form of narrative medicine. Like that term had never been used with me before. I started working with this man on his memoir. His name was Jamie Shumway, and he was a cool guy. And we finished a draft of his memoir. And here's the amazing part of that story. So it's always amazing and surprising when things get published or you win an award or things like that. This was like the single moment where I was like, what I do makes a difference. His wife emailed me on the day I was supposed to come and work with him. She wanted to let me know that I didn't need to come over. She and Jamie's home care nurse had read the memoir from beginning to end. And the day that she read him the last sentence of his memoir, he died peacefully at home away from hospital. And that's when I was like, this is bigger than me, and this is bigger than anything else I'll ever do. And wow. And so that's what I'd like to think here with medicine. I love that. Thank you for asking me that question. I also love to tell the story of.
Any other questions from our wonderful, wonderful audience here? Well, tell you what, I did have a question from Sarah Sawyer. Some of you have had her as a professor. She's a biology professor. But I'll tell you what, I'll give you, the audience, a choice. Would you like to hear another question about health, humanities, or a question about cryptids?
This is gonna be one or the other.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So an easy one first. Renee, what's your favorite West Virginia cryptid and why?
Oh, okay. So it's a hard, easy question. Before I started writing the poems, I would have said Montgomery. I really loved Montgomery. But as I wrote these poems, it actually became Flatwoods Monster because I imagined the Flatwoods Monster going to the Morgantown Beauty College. Because she has the scissor-like hands, and then all I could think about was the play/movie Grease and the song Beauty School Dropout. And then I imagined her like perming and dyeing her hair a terrible color and then dropping out of the Morgantown Beauty College. And if you're around Morgantown, like the students they're all in black except for it's like this beauty college in bright pink. Right? And so like then every time I saw the students from the beauty college, I imagined them as the Flatwoods Monster. So but I also they're not West Virginia cryptids, but one of my favorite side characters in this little book with Sally are the Kentucky Goblins. Do we know about the Kentucky Goblins?
No.
And so they come because they're like cousins of the Mothman. And, he has to tell them to, come back when they can't stay so long. Because they're those kind of cousins.
We've all got them.
But they were one of my favorite minor characters. But I have to go with the Flatwoods Monster.
Yeah, you sold me. I would agree with the Flatwoods Monster. It's a strange cryptid. Well, Sarah Sawyer did have a question for you, and I think it kind of is maybe a way to sort of wrap all this up because Sarah read Professor Sawyer read your work, and I think she noticed just how diverse you are as a poet and a writer. And so her question is about health humanities, but I think it's also about how you're integrating all of these different disciplines. So here's her question: how do you approach integrating such disparate disciplines, biology and medicine and poetry, and I think maybe we can add cryptids in there too.
Sure. Yeah. So, I thought about this because I'm so glad that I had this question in advance because it's a great question, but it really requires some time to think about it. And I guess I never really saw myself as writing so much about biology and medicine. But I'm working creatively adjacent to those disciplines, right? So kind of having just the right accessory that makes the outfit, I don't know. But this creative adjacent, particularly in medicine, because I'm in these medical situations a lot. And so where like the doctors and other health professionals diagnose, I see the work that I'm doing is creating a context around the biomedical work. So that the health professionals, they get a bigger view, right? And they can understand things in a way that's more holistic. And I thought about this, like disease does not happen in a vacuum for a patient. You aren't just like an inanimate object and then boom, one day you're struck with whatever, right? The patient has their whole life going on. They have all these different roles, right, when they're diagnosed. And so when I was working, especially on the life stories with patients, or when I write about my own illness or caregiving, a disease is a complicating factor, right? And so there's now this whole different web of activity and relationships that happen around this person that we call the patient, right? And so I think the writing has to honor both those things, or it's really not doing the work that it could. And she had kind of asked another question to tease this out more, and it made me think about beautiful, beautiful, like art photographs that are in the Health Science Center at WVU, and they're pictures of cells, and they're huge. They're like about the size of that. They're just huge, massive, and they're full of rich blues and vibrant greens. They're streaked through with oranges and reds, and they're visually just stunning, right? And they're also cells, right? They're not one or the other. And they use these chemical dyes so that to produce these colors so the scientists can study them. And because they are these beautiful colors, they can blow them up and the artists can study them, right? And so we both get to use air quotes, read these cells and through these different lenses. And they can be appreciated as art and they never stop being art. And that to me was the best way I could explain how to do it. And I really wish I had one of them because they are just beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think if there's a place between the poet and the scientist or the artist and the scientist, is that on a really, really basic level, we're both motivated by wonder. We wonder about something. And I think that also is a really nice thing to have. So that's my best answer for Sarah, and I appreciated her question and Wesley's questions and all these questions.
What a terrific answer. Thank you so much. Any final questions?
First made you want to write poems about like the things of West Virginia or just the Appalachians in general?
That's a great question. So, for a long time, I felt very off limits to writing about West Virginia, right? So my family is from the Parkersburg area, and that general region, Wood and Jackson County. And my father, as a first-generation college student, found work after college by leaving West Virginia. But all of our family events and everything were in the Parkersburg area. And so I had this like closeness, but I also didn't feel from. And then, as a dancer and other things, I moved around a lot. So I never really felt from anywhere. Well, I've now lived in West Virginia longer than I've lived any place in my life. I hang out with my family all the time. And I think that that's been kind of working on me. And then one particular poem kind of was like the pivot point for me. So there was this terrible tragedy that happened. I think it's Route 119. It cuts down through Morgantown. Everybody says it's the Grafton Road because it takes you to Grafton. And a school bus stop is on the Grafton Road, which is crazy. It's like 55 miles an hour on Grafton Road. Like, you should not have children getting on a bus there, but they did. And a young boy, middle school age boy, was killed crossing the road to get on his school bus. And this just struck me as tragic. And so I wrote the poem to try to just kind of deal with that. And it wasn't even somebody I knew. It just felt so tragic on like a level to lose a young person. And it was very much set on the Grafton Road. There's an old drive-in that's all shuttered. And I thought about that in relation to this. And then I got an interesting, so I had one book of poems out, and I got an interesting invitation, and it was to submit poems to an anthology called Eyes Glowing at the Edge of the Woods, Fiction and Poetry from West Virginia. And my first reaction was to write back and say, I'm not a West Virginia poet, right? And then I was like, well, you know, they asked you, you could put something out, don't get your hopes up. And so I sent that poem, and they took it. I remember the poetry editor for the anthology, Doug Van Gundy, said, I had no idea who you were, and then I get this poem, and I'm like, oh my goodness, here's one of us that I didn't know. And so then I went from feeling like West Virginia diaspora to feeling like a West Virginian. And then all of this, I started writing poems about my dad. I started writing poems about like me being in West Virginia. I started writing a lot of ecological poems about the landscape. It just like that released it for me. And I think if there's any wisdom to impart from my story is don't let you stand in the way of the subject matter that's meaningful to you. Like I was letting myself get in the way of that. And that wasn't serving me, it wasn't serving the poems. And it turned out not to really be true, right? Because I'm not really planning on leaving West Virginia. I mean, this is where my life is, right? So, and West Virginia is a beautiful, beautiful subject to write about. There's so much here to write about. So let other poets and writers who are writing the region inspire you, but don't let that stop you from writing your poem about West Virginia.
Yeah, West Virginia is a wonderful place for poetry, and Renee, you're evidence of that. Absolutely. Any other questions for Renee? Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I loved it. I'm sure you guys did too. So let's let her know. And thank all of you. You're a great audience, and thank you everyone out there watching this now and maybe in the future. So thank you so much. Feel free to hang out if you want to ask Renee some questions off the YouTube feed and in private. I'm sure she wouldn't mind chatting with you and hanging out. Grab a snack, and thank you all so much.